Hello friends and welcome to 100 Days in Minecraft Horse Edition. I'll be running a custom mod pack that you can play with for yourself, linked below, and the staple mod we will be focusing on is Swem, a mod that overhauls every aspect of a vanilla horse. Also, I will be opening a premium horse roleplay server on Minecraft featuring Swem and many other mods we are playing with today, so keep an eye out on my channel for that. And if you like to play vanilla or on Bedrock, we have a server called Pinecraft Equestrian already up and running for you to enjoy. The IP is pinecraftequestrian.com and you can join right now. Without further ado, let's jump into this mega challenge. And day one begun. I was really happy with my spawn point as I already had access to wood and some fruits. I got myself equipped with a wooden pick, then upgraded to stone, also crafting a sword and an axe. I also made a boat since there appeared to be quite a lot of water around and it would make traveling a lot easier. Pam's Harvestcraft Trees mod came in very handy since food was already in abundance. I smacked up some cows and gathered more wood as I started to make my way inland along a river. I came across a pretty large cave, but before I even stepped foot inside, a Satan spawn ran out and tried to get me. Luckily, he couldn't swim. Night fell very quickly, and like a true newbie, I made myself a little hidey hole in the side of a mountain, and all through the night I did mining. I was hoping for iron, but had no such luck. Day 2, I emerged from my tunnels and slayed my first zombie. I wanted to take a look in the cave I saw yesterday, but honestly, the shaders I was using made it so hard to see. It made me really spooked how I could hear the mobs but not see them, so I just ducked out and grabbed an exposed copper vein just outside. I hadn't played much survival beyond 1.15.2, so I didn't know that copper was practically useless. I smelted that and hopped into my boat to travel upstream. I chose a forest to get out at and I found some wild doggies. I really wish I had some bones on me, but I didn't, so unfortunately I had to keep moving. My goal for today was to try and get a backpack, and for that I needed leather and string. I was kind of dreading having to smack up a spider until I spotted this tree with cobwebs growing on it. When harvested, the tree gave me string, so I was well chuffed at that. At this point, I've been traveling most of the day, so it was time to burrow underground again and keep mining. That night, I also made my backpack, and it was going to be a lifesaver since it gave me so much more portable storage. Day 3 began with me spotting a forest fire. I knew it had been caused by lava nearby, but I didn't want the whole forest to burn down since there could have been animals in there. I did my best to slow down the fire and stop the other trees from catching, and my conservation efforts were a success. I was rewarded by seeing my first bee. I didn't have a base to bring him back to yet, so I just left him be. Bee, get it? Anyway, I made my way back across the river and found this absolutely lovely plains area. It was connected by the river, there was a forest nearby, and the land wasn't too hilly, so I thought this would be a great place to set up camp for now. I started clearing some land, almost drowned in a flooded crevasse, and started laying down some cobble for my house. Very quickly, I realized my skills for stable building did not extend to houses. I struggled for a while and then decided to go cave mining for the night. I found quite a few coal deposits, but no iron. Day 4, I tore down the house foundations in favour for a makeshift wood tent. I had managed to kill 2 sheep, so I did make myself a bedroll. I took the time to go and find a tutorial for the house so that I could build something really nice. After looking around, I settled on this house by a croissant cat, and the good thing about finding a tutorial is that I would know exactly how many blocks I needed of each material. My main concern was the concrete, and I did genuinely Google where to find concrete powder since it had been so long that I didn't even know you had to craft it. But sand and gravel were going to be easy enough to get, and it was more the white dye that concerned me. With the list of materials in mind, I went to go mining in an actual cave, not the tunnel. At the entrance of the cave, I completely noped out because it was so dark and so scary. I opted to turn off shaders for this particular cave run. As soon as my shaders were done loading, I went back to the game, only to be kindly greeted by my first creeper who blew me up. Then, I discovered that the bedroll does not in fact set your spawn point, and I was right back where I started. Yay! Luckily, I did know the way back, so I crafted a boat and was on my way. To be fair though, is it really a Minecraft playthrough if you don't get blown up by a creeper at some point? I got back and slept in my wooden tent, very much aware that if I died again, I would be sent right back to the start. Day 5, I was reinvigorated by my frustration and stormed down to get my stuff. But I wasn't going to give up yet. As I went a little further, I found my first bits of iron. This started that strangely addictive process of mining. I wanted to grab everything I could. I ended up getting lapis, a whole bunch of coal, redstone, glow ink sacks, and kanzerite. Kanzerite was a key component in our equestrian goals because swem horses didn't spawn in the wild. I would need the kanzerite to brew up a potion that would turn a regular horse into a swem horse. I had a pretty decent haul to bring back to camp, so I surfaced and slept. Day 6, I smelted my iron and treated myself to an iron pick and a full set of iron armor. I also crafted a campfire, and I didn't know this at the time, but that campfire would turn out to be very, very important to me. I decided to start farming, and instead of clearing an area, I used the natural small pond near my tent and tilled the area. I stuck a few seeds down and did some chest inventorying. That pretty much took the whole day, so I went back to sleep because I didn't want to risk mining at night in an open cave. Day 7, I was hungry for resources, so I made my way into the cave once again. This time though, I didn't make it too far before I misjudged my capabilities and went head on against a horde of mobs, only to be absolutely decimated. Once again, I made my way back home feeling pretty dejected, so I chefed up a sheep that I later cooked on my campfire to make myself feel better. I was absolutely dreading going back to that cave to get my stuff. Day 8, to cheer myself up, I made an animal wagon, and this was my new favorite thing ever. I put a chicken in it and used to set up a little pen where I would hopefully be able to catch more chickens for a coop. After some procrastinating, I did muster up the courage to go back down and get my stuff. I successfully yoinked my grave and scrabbled quickly to the surface. Day 9 was the day I conquered the mines. I spent the whole day down there. From morning to night, I fought and mined some more. I went so far that I couldn't remember how to get out, so I just used the dig straight up technique. When I did manage to get out, I realized it was the dead of night and I had to fight for my life until the sun rose. Day 10 brought a rather pressing issue. I didn't know where I was. I had forgotten to put a waypoint at my camp, and the caves made me completely lose my bearings. This was pretty problematic since I could choose a direction and just go the wrong way. I tried to follow my gut and went northeast from the hill. The minimap wasn't too helpful since I couldn't see anything around me. As I went, I spotted a village up top a mountain and figured it would be worth going up there to loot, and hopefully I could increase my render distance and try to see where my camp was. After climbing the hill and perusing the village for stuff like boots and hay bales, I suddenly noticed all the villagers were animals. In the texture pack, they were changed to look like wolves and foxes and other creatures, so the villagers actually looked really cute for once. I slapped up that render distance and used the Optifine zoom to my advantage. At first, I couldn't see anything of use, but I did see another village down in the valley. Eventually, I gave up and went back to looting, but I just had this feeling that I hadn't looked properly. I gave the area one last sweep, and that's when I spotted a pillar of smoke. I immediately knew this was my campfire. I was so thrilled, I almost couldn't believe I had found it. I was really lucky I had placed that campfire because the camp would have been much harder to locate without it. I made my way home, and the first thing I did was set a waypoint so that I would never lose it again. After all that excitement, day 11, I wanted to have a nice quiet day at the camp. I was greeted by a wild cow who then proceeded to turn away disgusted when I started cooking steak at my campfire. I headed to the nearby forest to grab some wood and made sure to replant saplings whenever I could. When it got late, I headed back and I thought about building a bridge over the river for easy access. Day 12 was equally as quiet as I just cleared some land in preparation for building. I made chests for storage and prepped a list of materials that I would need for my house. I had to get a whole lot of sand and gravel, but I didn't really want to destroy the area's natural beauty, so the plan was to go out tomorrow and look for a desert biome. Day 13, I set sail in my boat. I was hoping to just be able to follow the river as far as it would go, and I was pleasantly surprised that the river was really well connected and ran for a good length. This was great news since the boat was faster than walking and generally less dangerous. I made various stops for supplies and gravel, and then I was lucky enough to spot a desert biome. I made my way over ASAP and started gathering sand. The trip by boat had taken up most of the day, so it wasn't long before I had to start heading back. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to get all the way home before it was dark, and while I could have chanced it in the boat, I did spot a village that I would be safer at. Thankful for their lights and iron golem, I slept in a vacant house. Day 14 was a miraculous day. When I stepped out of the house, right at the tippy top of the hill, I spotted my first horse. I was very excited since this was the first one I had found so far. I quickly looted the village and made my way up to it. The horse was by himself and I didn't really want to leave him up here, so I psyched myself up for the arduous task of pushing this horse down the mountain and hopefully trap him in my boat. This horse absolutely did not want to leave, and I don't blame him because the views were stunning, but I really wanted him to come home with me. It took me ages to make any progress with him, but while I was doing so, I realized I should tame him to stop him from despawning. When I was a mere 40 blocks from my boat, I remembered I had a saddle in my inventory. This whole time, I had looted it from this village as well. A bit embarrassed, I rode down to the boat. At first I didn't think he was going to fit, but then he did. He wasn't happy at all about the boat ride home, and I did feel a little bad for abducting him, but I had a horsey now. On the way back, I saw an actual herd of horses. It felt like my lucky day for sure, and I tamed them all and went to sleep in my new bedroll. Day 16, I got the horse home safe and sound. I had nicknamed him Rocky because he looked a little bit like a Rocky Mountain horse, so I thought it suited him quite well. He shared a pen with the chicken for now. I did a few farm chores, but unfortunately still did not have enough sand, so I ventured out to continue gathering. Day 17 and 18 was spent entirely on getting sand and gravel. I was also prepping for another trip to the mines, and on day 19, I used the same cave as usual and mined up a bunch of ores. Everything was going swimmingly until I got a little too confident and misjudged the position of a water block, thus falling to my death. I then learned the importance of the sleeping bag because it didn't set your spawn point and it allowed you to sleep anywhere, but because I had slept in a bed at the village, that's where I ended up respawning. Day 20, I fought my way through the caves to get my stuff. On my way, I spotted a single diamond, so I grabbed my things and went to go get that diamond. I should have waypointed it or at least noted the coordinates, but I did not, so I spent a good chunk of time searching the cave. I did eventually find it and went straight back to mining. I found so many goodies. There were so many diamonds, and I even stumbled upon a mine shaft where I found my first name tag. Eventually it rolled over to day 21 and I was still in the mines, but before long I got a bit bored, so I decided to resurface. Now, this next part is by far the creepiest thing to ever happen to me in Minecraft. As I was digging straight up, out of nowhere, I hear a jukebox start to play. The music is haunting, and I even checked my settings to confirm the music was off. I tried so hard to locate the source, digging up and down and left and right, using the volume to tell if I was getting closer or further away. Then, it just stopped. I waited for a bit, but it didn't restart. I don't know where or what it was, but there was a part of me that didn't want to find out. I very quickly exited the underground. Despite that strange event, I went home and smelted all my goodies. Day 22, I decided it was high time to actually get a building down. I decided to start with a chicken coop since it was relatively small, but it was going to be very useful. I pillared up high to get a good lay of the land. In my head, I marked out where I wanted a house, a stable, a greenhouse, and the coop. I looked up a handy dandy tutorial by Fresh Joy, and by the end of the day, the coop was mostly finished. Day 23 came along and I went to go get my chickens, only to be blown up by a creeper. Not once, but twice. The second creeper took out most of my sand storage and I was completely gutted. I decided I had had enough and this was my own fault. It was time to build a storehouse. But first I did have to move the chickens into their new house. I was pretty proud of the new coop, so I knew that I'd be able to take on the storehouse easy peasy. I only really managed to get the pillars down before nightfall, and on day 24 I went out to gather some more wood. Day 25 I actually finished the shed building, and I was also visited by my first wandering trader. Upon seeing his prices, I quickly dispatched of him and nicked his leads. The rest of that day, as well as the entire day 26, I moved and sorted all my items into the new building, sure that they would be safe from creepers for now. Day 27, I wanted to get some cows, but first I needed to make a pasture. I made a large square behind the chicken coop and grabbed the nearby cows to populate it. I think one of them may have been the cow who witnessed me cooking steak, so I can't imagine what this guy was thinking following me in here. With my farm slowly growing, I had to start thinking about my house. Sand and gravel had been acquired, but I was missing white dye. I would need a heck of a lot of bones to pull this off, so I grabbed Rocky from his sad little pen. I really needed to make a stable soon, but for right now, I had a mission. We rode over to the village in the valley that I had spotted earlier, and I made sure to put Rocky in a nice crowded pen. I feel like he wasn't too thrilled at being surrounded by other animals, and since I had found him alone, he was probably more of a lone wolf, but I really needed to make sure he was safe. I waited for nightfall and started slaying. By the time the sun rose, I had a whopping 9 bones, and I realized this was a very inefficient method of bone collecting. Day 28 got me excited because I saw my first Enderman. I really needed to kill one because the swem mod had a crafting recipe for blaze rods and that required an ender pearl. This would save me from having to go to the nether and kill a blaze, which ordinarily would be quite a feat. But he teleported away before I could even get my bearings and I was unable to find him again at all. I did find this really cool sunken house though. I can imagine if I did it all up with vines and mushrooms, it would be a really atmospheric place. I wasn't going to do that though. I took Rocky home, did some farm chores, and set out in search of more Endermen. I really wanted to turn Rocky into a swem horse soon, and I needed 2 ender pearls to do it. I was in awe of this ocean biome lake that was directly behind my camp. Having it surrounded with the overgrowth made it feel like a secret garden of sorts. I was super lucky and found not just 1, but 2 Endermen in a cave. I felt kind of bad because these guys were just minding their business, but horsies took priority, I'm afraid. I used the roof method to stop them from being able to hit me and got my 2 ender pearls. Day 29 was an important day. I crafted a blaze rod and made my first potion. It was a Cancerite potion and it would turn Rocky into a fully formed swem horse. I was a little nervous because in 1.18.2, swem horses needed to eat and drink, and I wasn't totally sure if I had the facilities for that yet. Looking back, I didn't even have a stable for him, so I probably should have waited, but I gave him the potion and he changed. He did have a random coat on him and I needed lapis and redstone to change the color. Now, at the time, I did think he was bugged, but what I didn't know was that he needed to be retamed before I could do anything with him. At the time, I just panicked and put him in this horrible makeshift pen. I then looked up how to make tack for him since the vanilla saddles didn't work, and it turns out I needed a bunch of kelp. Day 30, I went out to the ocean and harvested a bunch of kelp. Came home, dried it, and made some refined leather. I needed this to make the tack. I also needed wool, so I lured some local sheep into the cow pasture to breed them. Day 31, I finally realized I needed to tame Rocky again in his new form, and I can't lie, having him in the tiny pen with me jumping on his back until he accepted it made me feel really icky. Like, I did not feel like this was humane. I felt like that general guy in Spirit Stallion the Cimarron trying to break the horses. Anyway, once that was over with, I made a few pieces of tack, but I required more wool, so I went out back to the overgrowth to find some wild sheep. It was back here that I saw an iguana for the first time. In fact, this was the only mob I had seen so far from the mod Alex's Mobs, and I wondered where all the other animals were. I will spoil that I did not see anything else spawn from that mod the entire playthrough. I ended up sleeping in the brush and continuing my search for wool on day 32. I was finally able to craft a full set for Rocky, and I got to ride him for the first time. I love the animations from this mod so much and just had a great time riding around for a bit. The horses are amazing at covering a lot of ground quickly, and I was sure this was going to help me out in the long run, as well as having a great companion. I can't say Rocky had as much fun as I did, but I decided to try and make it up to him by getting his coat back. Unfortunately though, I did run out of lapis before I got to a suitable coat, so he was stuck as a chestnut pinto for a little bit. When I woke up on day 33, Rocky was munching at my crops, so I figured it was best to make him a stable. I cleared the land and set down an outline with diorite. The stable didn't take me too long, but I knew I wanted at least 3, so while the first one was done and down, I wanted room to expand at some point. I made sure Rocky had a bucket and also managed to get a coat that roughly suited his original look. It wasn't perfect, but it was as close as I was going to get. Day 34 was when I started on my big farm. I knew I needed a lot of crops to feed Rocky in his new form, so I was going to go all out with it. First, I made a plow, and while I would have loved to have Rocky help me by pulling the plow, swem horses could no longer attach to carts in 18.2. I cleared lots of land by the back of my camp so that I would have enough space, and that took most of the day. I also tried to feed Rocky some vanilla hay, but he couldn't eat it, which was a real shame. Day 35, I had so much fun running around with the plow and tilling all the land behind me. All you had to do was equip it with 3 hoes, put the plow arm down, and then move wherever you wanted. It definitely made what would have been a really tedious task into something I enjoyed. I started thinking about maybe getting a donkey so that I could have something pull a cart or plow with me in the future. Day 36, I managed to whack down all my seeds. They were a mix of wheat, alfalfa, oats, and timothy hay. I have to admit, I take so much joy in the farmer role. It speaks to me far more than miner or lumberjack or even builder. After a hard day's work, I make sure to top up Rocky's water in his stall. It took me 37 days to have my first forgot to press record incident, so I am impressed I held out so long. Luckily, I didn't do much other than ride Rocky across the river and into the forest, where I tied him up by a lake and started gathering wood. I slept over there to roll on to day 38. Now, I have a confession to make. Day 37 also included me accidentally committing a crime so heinous I am reluctant to even mention it. Remember the bee we saw on day 3? Well, I found his hive and his partner bee, and instead of Googling it, like I should have, I assumed that I had to place a campfire under the hive and break it, not knowing that I needed silk touch for it to actually drop. I had managed to make 2 bees homeless, and without the honeycomb to make an artificial hive, they were left to fend for themselves. I felt absolutely terrible, but for right now there wasn't anything I could do for them, so I continued gathering my wood. Meanwhile, I fed Rocky any apples I found, and he happily munched on grass and drank the lake water. At the end of the day, we headed home, and I had a really pleasant ride back. The swem horses were big, so they moved pretty fast. My favourite thing though was that they could actually swim, unlike vanilla horses where they would just sink. Rocky and I hadn't had much time to bond, so this was a really nice day to have spent together. Day 39 was when I realized how cruel it was to keep Rocky in his stall all the time, so it was time to make a paddock. I got to work clearing some land and setting down the fences. This rolled over onto day 40 when it was finally done, but I realized since this was a self-turnout paddock, the other 2 stables needed to be built too, or Rocky could just walk away, so I started on them as well. Day 41, I almost finished the stables apart from the roof, but when I woke up on day 42, I realized I had done a botched job on the 3rd stable roof, so I did have to redo that. Then I brushed Rocky, who was enjoying his new paddock, did some farm chores, and crafted a knife. Day 43 and 44 were dedicated to doing a huge harvest of my crops. It was a bit of a nightmare to replant all the seeds by hand because there was just so much land and so many seeds. If only I had remembered to include a mod that added a mob who did auto farming for you and was also really adorable. Day 45, I set up a wall around the farm, not because I really had anything to defend against, more that I wanted it to look aesthetically pleasing. I had a routine with Rocky now where every day I made sure to fill his water, turn him out, and to give him a brush. I had made this hay ball feeder, but it wasn't actually functional, and I had also made a slow feeder that I put in his stable, but I didn't yet have anything to put inside of it. Once that was done, I popped out in the late evening to look for some pumpkins, but I wasn't successful. Day 46, I decided I wanted to take Rocky out on an adventure, and to my frustration, I had forgotten to press record that day. Again. Not too much happened, but the trip to the desert biome that would usually take most of the day in the boat only took me till the afternoon. I found a desert temple and looted it, finding some XP potions for Rocky. On day 47, I woke up in my makeshift camp just outside of the temple. I decided to give Rocky the potions I'd found the day before, and that gave us some speed XP, health XP, and some more bonding. I was already a little over encumbered, so I thought I could offload some items into Rocky's saddlebag, but then I found swem saddlebags have designated slots, which is a really cute idea, but it meant I had no real storage. I travelled a little further into the desert where I found a lovely river cutting through the sand. I decided to let Rocky have a wander around here since he would have access to food and water. Then I collected some cacti and got to work getting the sand. While I was collecting the sand, I had a long hard think about my white dye problem. To make white dye, I needed bone meal or lily of the valley flowers. There was no way I was going to collect enough flowers to fill the quota, so I had to rely on bones. Since my night escapades only resulted in a measly 9 bones, I had only 2 options left. 1, find a skeleton spawner in the mines. This would allow me to set up a skeleton farm, which would give me plenty of bones. 2, locate a fossil. They coincidentally spawned above and below ground in deserts, but I wasn't guaranteed to find one here. I didn't know how far away the next desert biome was or how to even search for the fossil in this desert. I would keep an eye out in this desert for a fossil, but logically, looking for a skeleton spawner was probably a better bet. I slept under the stars again that night in my bedroll. Day 48, I continued my sand shoveling in the early morning and decided to head home soon after. The terrain was a piece of cake for Rocky, and we actually bonded up from tolerant to indifferent that day. One thing I had to keep an eye out for was sudden ravines. As Rocky was going so fast, we'd fall right into one if I wasn't careful. We were almost out of the desert when I spotted a hole in the sand, and I figured it was worth a peek into. Lo and behold, I had stumbled upon a fossil. I had basically struck gold. This was the last type of resource I needed for my house. I headed down ASAP, and after dispatching a few mobs, I got my hands on the fossil and started mining. This was when I realized how unsettling the sound is when you break bone blocks. I got a little bit cocky and did some mining in the cave before realizing it was dark, so I resurfaced and slept. On day 40, I bimbled around the cave for a little bit more before heading home with Rocky. On the way back, I grabbed some pumpkins and spotted my first donkey. I tamed him so that he wouldn't despawn and left a waypoint so I knew where he was. I didn't want to bring him home just yet since I had way too much on my plate already. Day 50, exactly halfway through the challenge, I had a solid plan for my house, the stables, and my overall farm. This was also the day my straw golems were born. They were so cute. I wanted to just eat them. They made the most adorable little noises and started slowly working on my field. I then crafted up all the concrete blocks I needed and found that thanks to the fossil, I had actually gotten more than enough white dye for both the house and possibly the stables too. I was a bit horrified that I only had concrete powder and I would have to wet each block to make the actual concrete, but that was a problem for another day. Day 51, I enacted phase 1 of my plan, gathering. Rocky and I headed to the forest across the river and I just went to town. I had a lot of wood products to make, like slabs and stairs, so I wanted to make sure I had everything I needed before I set down my first block. This continued on to day 52, and that evening I started phase 2, light up the area. Admittedly, I probably should have done this ages ago, but I really dislike having torches all over the place. But when I started building, I wanted to make sure I could work all through the night with minimal interruptions. Day 53, I marked out the outline of the house in cobblestone. It was a little bit hard to tell where the entrance was going to be from the video, and I needed it to face a specific way. I was glad I double-checked this outline as I was a couple of blocks off the first time. Phase 3 was the most boring phase. I spent the evening of day 53 and the entirety of day 54 turning my powder into concrete blocks. I'm sure there is some better auto farming method to do this, but I found my rhythm and got everything done. The night of day 54 until day 57, I constructed like my life depended on it. I followed the tutorial to a T and it was really helpful. I won't lie, after like day 35, I was heavily doubting that I would be able to make this particular house because it required so much white dye and so much concrete, and I did consider picking a different house to build. I did want to keep a lot of the process in the video so you can see how I did this totally by hand in survival. When the outside was mostly finished, it looked stunning. I still had to do the windows and the interior, but I was well proud of myself. I then remembered that I had not seen or cared for Rocky since day 53, and I realized he was in trouble. His food and water were getting lower and I couldn't understand why. He had access to both in his field. I assumed that he was okay for the time being and did a quick trip into the mines for more gravel and diorite. That night I continued to finish the interior of my house. Day 58, I updated the stables. I wanted it to match better with my new house and for it to look a little more swanky, so I replaced the oak plank exterior walls with white concrete. The stable looks so much nicer with their upgraded walls, and I installed rubber mats on the floor of all of the stalls. Adding trapdoors to give a little more dimension and detail, I was well happy with the new look. The stables reminded me a little bit of that Littlest Pet Shop horse stable set. My mood was dampened when I checked up on Rocky only to find his food and water had deteriorated further. I just didn't know how to help him. Day 59, it rained most of the day, but I had finally smelted enough sand for the windows. I adore how the stained glass looks in this texture pack. I'd actually made my bottom floor windows bigger in my house compared to the tutorial because I am a sucker for large windows and natural light. I adored my open window view from what would later become my bedroom. Day 60, I had enough waiting to see if Rocky would get better because he just wasn't. I needed to go away mining for the day, so I crafted loads of alfalfa bales and put them in his stall, both in a freestanding stack and in his slow feeder. I made sure his water was full and shut off his access to the paddock. My theory was that he would have to eat and drink if he was in a closed-off area rather than wandering around. I was still super concerned for him and felt really bad since he was my first horse, so I didn't even know if I was doing anything right. I did head underground and was very successful, finding lots of ore and also diamonds. My favorite thing to find though was this skillet, which I think was part of the Wild Farm Craft mod. I saw it had a damage stat, so I went to go try it out on an unsuspecting zombie. Not the most effective weapon, but the clang sound did make me laugh. I spent a really long time in the caves because I wanted this to be one of the last times I went down. I didn't resurface until day 62, where I ran home to see if Rocky had improved. He had only eaten half a bale, but his meter hadn't moved even one bit. I hand-fed him 2 entire bales and then went to smelt my ores to have a brainstorm session. When the rain cleared up, I went to do some farm chores and noticed that the sheep and cow pasture was really laggy to be inside. I figured it was due to the number of entities in one chunk since the chickens were nearby as well. So it was about time I started thinking about a cow barn. I did almost blow up all my chickens with a creeper too, so that was fun. Day 63, I cleared some land and set down the foundations for the cow barn behind the sheep pasture. It still needed to match my house and the stables, so while the base was diorite, the walls were going to be concrete and the roof would be wood. I wasn't doing anything fancy with it shape-wise, it was just going to be a large rectangle, but I wanted the roof to be a bit more barn-like. So come day 64, I did it up, and I was pretty darn impressed of how I did that freestyle. I spent the night doing the interior, so I was finished by the end of the day. Day 65 was Save Rocky Day. I finally looked up on the wiki how the feeding works, and to my horror, you had to feed them every day with grain. I made a vet kit and checked Rocky for the first time, and it logged him as missing 14 meals. That certainly explained why he was in such a state. I got round to actually naming him with a name tag and made a grain feeder. Then I crafted a bunch of sweet feeds to put in the new feeder and set it all up in his stall. One thing that was a complete pain to do was to fill up his water bucket since it held 3 buckets worth of water and I had to keep going back and forth to do it. Day 66, I was desperate to take Rocky on an adventure, but I had jumped the gun and he was still too sick to go. This was a real shame, but I was in need of spruce logs, so I decided to just go anyway. Here is me admiring my barn from the boat on my way out. I figured that I could go and pick up the donkey on my way out, and he could accompany me on the journey. Now, I know it says Jack on his GUI panel because that's the breed of donkey he is, but the name just sort of stuck, so I went along with calling him Jack. The weather was pretty terrible, so I decided to put him in the boat and make a pit stop at Rocky's village for the night. Day 67, I went further than I had ever gone before. I wanted to grab lots of flowers because my dream of having a greenhouse populated by bees was very much still alive, and I looted another village on my way. Day 68, I made the choice to continue looking for a spruce forest rather than turning back. Jack and I covered some good distance and I was having fun collecting loads and loads of flowers as we went. I was super happy when we found a plains biome covered in sunflowers. I watched the sunset here and it was pretty dreamy. On the morning of day 69, we came across this adorable mare and foal. They seemed to be by themselves in the sunflower plains and I wanted to just leave them be. Jack and I pressed on and once again I found the most precious little area filled with flowers and sheep. I went about collecting all the flowers when I suddenly noticed there were bees here. I did feel bad for nicking all their flowers, but this was also an amazing opportunity. If I harvested the honeycomb, I could finally craft an artificial hive and rescue the 2 homeless bees. I made sure to do it right this time and successfully scored 6 honeycomb. As lovely as it was here, it was time to press on, and as we got up the hill, we were greeted with a spectacular sight. Rolling fields with huge mountains in the back. It was almost too perfect. Using my Optifine zoom, I honed in on the horizon, spotting lava, a broken portal, and a village. I opted to go towards the broken portal for 2 reasons. 1, I could collect the portally blocks, and 2, I could get a better view from up the mountain. There wasn't anything really noteworthy here, but I did have a big storage issue. I didn't have space for anything in my inventory or my backpack, and I wanted to make a chest to put on Jack so he could carry some things, but I didn't have any wood. I chose to climb the mountain, and we were so lucky in finding a village at the top, but first I was in awe of this extreme valley. It was almost like a crater. If I had been in creative, I would have loved to build something here. I just looted the village and slept. For day 70, I put in my notes dummy dum dum forgot to record, so clearly I wasn't too happy at the time. From what I remember, I got some wood from the village so I was able to outfit Jack with a chest, and I used the village church as a vantage point. I was thrilled when I spotted a spruce forest and made my way all the way over. When I got to the edge of the forest, I slept again. Day 71 was spent gathering wood and making sure I had saplings to replant so I wouldn't have to come so far whenever I needed spruce. I stumbled upon a village that was just so beautiful, and after I ransacked it, I made sure to pick up some sweet berries. Jack and I made our way home, and by day 72 we were back at the farm. I introduced Rocky and Jack, and while they didn't seem too keen on each other, I just put it down to Rocky feeling a bit unwell. He was improving but still wasn't 100%. I made him an armored pasture blanket to keep him safe and warm when he chose to be outside. I also made lots of bales to feed him with and a fridge to put in what would be my kitchen. Day 73, I tended to Rocky by brushing, feeding, and making sure his water bucket was full. Then I set out to the mesa biome that was located by the desert so that I could get terracotta, a key crafting ingredient for my kitchen decor. Day 74, I mined up the blocks I needed and headed home with my bounty. I'd been in the practice of taking the boat since the route was connected by a long river, so it was pretty convenient. That night, I made my counters and opted for light blue dye since I wanted the kitchen to feel bright but not too colourful. I also checked up on Rocky, who was sleeping, and look how cute he is! Oh my goodness! It was at this moment I realised I would die for this horse. I filled up his feeder and checked up on Jack, who had wandered to the back of the paddock and was just minding his own business. In the early hours of day 75, I started putting together my kitchen. I was very happy with my colour choice, and I just potted around checking in on Rocky and decorating my downstairs kitchen and living room. This rolled into day 76, where I continued my decorating, using candle lanterns to light up some areas and flowers to make places look more colourful. Day 78, I started on decorating the upstairs, which proved slightly more difficult than I had anticipated, so that evening I took a break and decided to have a crack at properly decorating the cow barn so that I could finally move the cows in. See what I did there? I did a test run of 2 types of gates. One was a double wooden gate that was quite low, and the other was a grey metal pasture gate that was meant for the swem horses. I found I liked the metal gate more as it gave off more of a farm vibe than a cottagecore vibe. The sun started to rise, signifying it was now day 79. I continued decking out the barn using iron bars as railings in the loft, friendly bars on windows, and placing cauldrons as water troughs for the cows. In the dead of night, I picked out 4 cows to be milk cows and 2 to be meat bred. The meat cows would have a bigger stall at the back of the barn to give me space to breed them, and I hoped to eventually give the milk cows names. That night, I culled the remaining cows and counted up my sheep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. In the morning, I headed into my new kitchen to grill some steaks before heading to the stables to bring Rocky inside for his breakfast. I was confused when I found some of the pond had iced over, since we never got snow or ice here, and it was then I realized that the armor pasture blanket was giving Rocky the power of Frostwalker, essentially rendering him unable to drink from the pond. Despite the setback, I brought him inside and he had a big drink from his bucket. The new rule was he wasn't allowed to be turned out until he had at least eaten his grain, so I left him in the stall and went about doing farm chores, mostly breeding sheep, collecting eggs, and repairing the fence after a creeper had damaged it. Come evening, it was time for me to do something I'd been putting off for a little while. The house was now fully built and there was no reason to sleep in my makeshift tent that I set up all the way back on day 4. I made myself a lovely pink bed, went upstairs and put it down. With my respawn point now set, there was only one thing left to do, and that was to tear down my camp. It was a bittersweet moment that was the mark of progress I had made in all those days, but I was still grateful for my humble beginnings. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time. Day 80, I woke up to sunlight streaming in through my window. It was a beautiful moment to have. Today was spring cleaning and more decorating. I removed the makeshift chests I had placed down for constructing my house, sorted my inventory, and started making some more decorational blocks for my bedroom. I wasn't too keen on my acacia desk, so I would have to fix that soon, and I settled on a single bed pushed up against the back window instead of a double off to the side. While I was on my way back to the storehouse, I popped in to see Rocky and top up his food and water. Then I crafted a boatload of different furniture and headed upstairs to tackle my bedroom once again. I used some cabinets as headboards, then switched out the acacia desk for an oak wood one. I attempted to make a cabinet unit out of cabinets, trapdoors, slabs, and a bookshelf. I switched the stone desk chair with an oak one, and in the night I continued my crafting until day 81. I made some custom fairy lights out of pink and white hearts, which I hung up over my bed, and soon I realized that with all the crafting, I was in dire need of better storage. This required me to pull out every single item and put it in a temporary chest outside the storehouse, extend the storehouse out, remove all the chests, place in storage crates, then place in barrels. I then had to put all the items into the corresponding container, and I combined this with crafting more decor items as I went. This took a major amount of time, so it wasn't until the morning of day 83 that everything was complete. Now everything had a designated spot and the storehouse was far more organized than before. I even had made this automatic smelter to make the job of smelting ores more convenient. It wasn't the most pro design, but it worked. I now had a workbench area for all of my tools and my crafting. This project was the second to most tedious, only after making concrete out of concrete powder, because I had so many blocks and items to move out and back into the storehouse, but it was finally complete. I was also excited to give you a full tour of the house since I hadn't done a proper one yet. When you enter the house, you are greeted by the kitchen, where I had set up a stew pot which unlocked a bunch of new recipes. I had a fridge where I kept some foods, and a freezer that I had no idea how to use, so I just put some raw meat inside. I also had so many random plants and veggies, so I put them all in my kitchen drawers. I had a working sink with an amazing window view. Then into the living room, I had some comfy pink sofas, and I was just really chuffed at how I had successfully used the space for furniture and shelving. My upstairs hallway was probably the saddest part of the house since I really had nothing in it apart from some empty shelves, but I had no clue what to put in there yet. My balcony was equally as sad, but I just hadn't gotten around to doing it up at that point. My bedroom, however, I was super happy with. My bed had a headboard and nightstands, accompanied with fairy lights and a picture frame and some plant pots. I had gone all out on my cabinet, placing paintings and lights and trophies from the swem mod, so I finally had a use for all the gold that was just lying around. I had this wardrobe where I put my armor for safekeeping. My desk was pretty minimal, but I really liked it. It had the best view in the house, and I could actually sit on the chair, which was a nice touch. I was really proud of my house. It had come such a long way from concept to construction to finish. I had also decorated the back of the house with flowers for a pop of color. However, spending so much time in the house, I had realized that the chicken coop across the lake had begun to bother me. The ugly wooden shack blocked my gorgeous white barn and just made the area a little bit unsightly, so I started to plan where I could move it. Day 83 was also a momentous day, as Rocky was finally back to full health after his rigorous routine and feeding schedule. Today was a day that felt like all the pieces were finally falling into place. To celebrate, I used my swanky new storehouse to craft some horsey items. I finally made a faucet and a block of water to supply it. I placed it above Rocky's bucket, so never again would I have to run back and forth filling it by hand. I also made a light blue slow feeder. In the evening, I tried out lamppost designs, but I was unsatisfied with the look, so instead I opted to spend the night placing in paths. I decided to use a mix of stone paths from Mr. Crayfish's furniture mod, diorite, cobblestone, and grass paths. Day 84, I continued pathing all the way up to the house and connected it to the farm. When I was done, I made myself a little dock. It wasn't anything grand, and I did want to keep things more natural, but I made this little cove where I could leave the boats. Before I went to bed, I had another crack at lamppost designing, but to no avail. Day 85, I woke up in the house and admired my handiwork on the way out. The plan was originally to put my head down and design a lamppost, but I ended up being really distracted in trying to make a fountain most of the day. It came out terribly, so I scrapped that idea and finally got on with making the lampposts. I settled on the design of one diorite block, a diorite wall, 2 fences, a slab, a trapdoor, and a lantern. I also decided it was time to rename the waypoint from camp to home, because it was no longer just a makeshift setup. Happy with that, I spent most of the night setting up my new lamppost, and I made a sweet feed bin for Rocky. In the early hours of day 86, I thought it was time to remove my lonely campfire, but I chose to honor it by setting up 2 large posts with campfires on the top, with hopes that these would bring me home the same way the original campfire did. I had enough of building for now, so I wanted to take Rocky out for a ride today, but it started raining out of nowhere. I really should have stayed home, but I didn't feel like doing anything else, and I didn't want to sit around and waste an entire day, so I tacked up Rocky and got on the road. The downside of rain meant aggressive mobs still spawned on the surface, and my hopes were that we could just outrun them since Rocky was so fast. It had been such a long time since I'd been in the saddle, and I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it. The section we were riding in now, I had secretly wanted to turn into an actual track for me and Rocky to train on, but I probably didn't have enough time since I still wanted an orchard and a greenhouse. Rocky was in tip-top shape again, which was great, so I took him towards the village in the valley, hoping to go even further. To my surprise, we hit a bamboo forest, and as soon as I saw this, all I wanted for today was to see a panda. I left Rocky behind while I went to collect some bamboo, and I heard a little chirpy whistle of a parrot. I turned around and found this poor guy sheltering under a bush. He was such a pretty color, and I wanted to take him home with me, so I broke all the grass and fed him any seeds I got. Eventually, I tamed him, and he got onto my shoulder, and look how cute he is! The first name that popped into my head was Bebo, so that's what I called him. Things got a bit dicey when zombies started coming at me, but I fought my way out with Bebo and got back to Rocky. My favorite thing was riding Rocky with Bebo on my shoulder. We looked like an awesome group. It was a bit stressful to get home as mobs kept charging us, and Rocky would pick the worst time to buck. But we made it home safe and sound, and while I wouldn't try going out in the rain again, I was glad I did this time since I had a new friend in the house. Rocky and I improved our relationship from indifferent to accepting, which was also nice. I untacked Rocky and got him ready for bed while Bebo hung out in his stall. When I was finished, I took him inside and made a little hanging cage out of iron chains, scaffolding, and an oak slab. It was a bit of a nightmare trying to get Bebo to sit inside, but once I was finished, he looked very happy in his new home. Before bed, I grabbed 2 name tags, one for Bebo and one for Jack, who had been hanging out at the back of the paddock. They both officially got named, and on my way back, I checked in on Rocky, who was lying down being all cute in his stall. Day 87, I used a new wheelbarrow to put all of Rocky's poop in, brought Jack up from the back of the paddock so they could hang out, decorated the cow barn with hay and crates, and started clearing some land for the coop relocation. In the evening, I made a measuring tool and set up some jumps in the paddock, which I took Rocky over. We weren't very good, and I was still using the Western Adventure set, so I went and crafted a black English set ready for tomorrow. Day 88, I set up some more jumps and got Rocky tacked up in his new gear. I was having a blast, and while we couldn't go that high yet, with some practice, I'm sure we would have improved. I originally didn't want to build an arena, but this certainly had me considering one. Then we were rudely interrupted by a trader and his llamas. I practically spent all day jumping, and in the late afternoon, I wanted to take Rocky out for a gallop. This also had me wishing I had an actual track to take him out on, but he did amazingly anyway. We also leveled up his speed that day. After the refreshing few days of horsing around, I decided to move the coop on day 89. I just needed it to be slightly more out of the way so as to complement the view of the barn rather than obstruct it. As I removed the coop, I was reminded that every step we take is important, even if we tear down that step to build something better later on. The coop was the first proper building I made, and it served its purpose. Now I was going to make something even lovelier in its place. It was the dead of night when I finally finished, and I had replaced the oak walls for white concrete to match my other builds. Day 90, with only 10 days left, I had to optimize my every move. I added some detailing to the chicken coop and decorated the exterior of the barn to maximize aestheticness. In the night, I started to path the area and make a little protruding dock. Day 91, I looked out my window and was satisfied with my new view of the barn and the coop. I then grabbed Jack and hitched him to the wagon. There was absolutely no reason for this other than I wanted a companion nearby while I cleared the area that was soon to be the orchard. I mapped out where all the trees would go and turned Jack out to the paddock in the night. Day 92, I planted the beginnings of my orchard. I opted for apple trees for 3 reasons. 1, I could feed the apples to Rocky. 2, I could make apple cider. And 3, they just looked really nice. In the night, I finally connected the stables area to the coop and barn via a path, and in the early morning to the afternoon on day 93, I set up lamps along this new path. I also marked out a new farm area with oak slabs, partly because I had a space to fill, and partly because I wanted easy access to the wheat for all the animals over this way. Day 94, with less than a week to go, I plucked up the courage to build a bridge over the river, connecting us to the forest. I was dreading this because of how wide the river was, and I was just really worried I would build an eyesore when I had done so well so far. I winged it, and well, it didn't turn out terrible. It wasn't my best work for sure, and it certainly wasn't symmetrical, but hey ho, at least it was done. Day 95, it was back in the orchard. I brought Rocky over to let him have a wander about, and I made a few baskets, mostly for decoration rather than storage. I also dyed Rocky's head collar because it was originally red, but I had decided since he had lovely green eyes that lime was more his color. Day 96 was Adventure Day. I took Rocky out for a ride to go back to the bamboo forest to see what was beyond it. And we found a panda. This creature is by far the most useless mob in Minecraft, but by gosh is it cute. I fed him some bamboo, and after he munched on that, I decided to just leave him alone. We ventured on and came across a beach where I saw my first turtles. Using my Optifine zoom, I spotted a forest mansion across the water, as well as some kind of sunken ruin. Emboldened, I made a boat and headed over to the ruin, hoping for a quick loot, only to sink my boat and be cornered by a trident-wielding drowned. He almost destroyed me, and I was starting to think I was a goner. By some luck and a lot of running, I made it to an island where I crafted a new boat and skedaddled out of there. That was certainly a dose of reality for me, and I headed home to safety with Rocky. With only 3 days left, I had one final mission: bees. I quickly set up my new farm and harvested my apples before grabbing Rocky and heading out. The last time I had seen them was by the village in the valley, but that was ages ago and they could be anywhere by now. I decided to start looking there and head towards the birch forest, as another hive was likely to have spawned there. I accidentally rode Rocky and I into some hemlock and we both took a bit of damage. In all honesty, I did not have high hopes for finding them, but to my shock, I spotted one hovering above the water. I panicked because bees take damage from water, so I had Rocky swim us over there so I could grab him with my lead. I would have stayed to look for the second bee, but it was getting dark and we would be slower getting back because of the bee, and I didn't want to risk any of us. We successfully returned and I dashed into the house to put the bee in temporarily, and I realized I had the birds and the bees in my house. I made him a new hive, and while I wanted to have a greenhouse with bees, he could just stay in the orchard for now. I kept an eye on him for a while, making sure he wouldn't fly off, and he eventually went into his new house. Rocky was exhausted and lay down in his stall as soon as he was untacked. Day 98, I made the tough call to stay home. I really wanted to go and get the second bee, but it was storming, and the last time I went out in the rain, the mobs gave me so much grief about it. Plus, the bees would probably stay in their hive today, so I wouldn't be able to bring it home without breaking their house. Instead, I finished up the orchard and made sure Rocky was ready for tomorrow. Day 99 was the last day I could really do anything, so I had to make sure I got the bee today. I got Rocky ready to roll. Wait, that's a great show name for him. Rock and roll. Anyway, I got him tacked up and we headed to the birch forest to find the bee. It wasn't hovering above the water, so I had to go further in and hope I could locate the hive. I spotted one bimbling around above the tree line, and as I went to go get it, I bumped into another one. There must have been 2 here already, and the 2 I made homeless traveled over here to house share. That meant that there was a total 3 bees in this forest, but I only had 2 leads. I went to go grab a flower to tempt the last one to follow when suddenly my game crashed. Error code 1. After a quick Google, I confirmed this was due to one of the mods, but I didn't think anything of it. When I loaded back into the game, I saw the day had reset, which was pretty frustrating, but it gave me the opportunity to bring 3 leads instead of 2. I ran to the stables to get Rocky, and he wasn't there. Rocky wasn't here. He wasn't in the paddock either, so I assumed he had been left at the forest for some reason. Not wanting to waste any time, I grabbed Jack and set out for the forest. He was a lot slower than Rocky, so it did take some time to get there. To my horror, Rocky wasn't where I had originally dismounted before the crash, but he might have just wandered off. I searched and searched and searched, pillaring up to try and see him through the trees. Rocky wasn't anywhere. I was getting really upset. I couldn't find him, and as night started to fall, it sank in that the crash may have erased him from my game. I couldn't understand why. I wasn't even sitting on him when the crash happened, unless Swem itself had caused the crash. Soon it was dark, and I had no choice but to abandon search, and with it, abandoning my hope of finding Rocky. I won't lie, I was devastated. This horse had been with me since day 14, and while we had our ups and downs, he was the whole reason I was doing this challenge. I had managed to lose my only horse on day 99. I put Jack back in the paddock by himself and felt so defeated. There was just no other option than to just end day 99. With day 100 upon us, I put on my original shaders and the world was vibrant and beautiful. I took the time to enjoy my bedroom and look out of my window at my farm. I had achieved so much in 100 days and I was so proud of what this little campsite had become. I love the theme of the place, and even though it was a right pain to get all the concrete, it was certainly worth it. I walked downstairs and said a final good morning to Bebo, enjoying the view from my kitchen window once again. I walked around my farm, admiring the colours and the lights. Then I went over to say hi to Jack. He was a hardy donkey that never let me down, and I'm sure he missed Rocky as much as I did, but he would be just fine hanging out in the paddock as usual. I said hi to the bale golems and admired my orchard and animal farm. There was so much I still wanted to do and build, from a greenhouse to an arena to more decorating. But before I finished my 100 days, there was one more thing I wanted to do. There we have it, 100 days in Minecraft Horse Edition. It did not have the ending I wanted and was a rather sad way to leave such a beautiful world, but sometimes that's the story that is told. Let me know what was your favourite part of my 100-day journey, and let me know if you want this story to continue into 200 days. The mod pack I use, the shaders, and the seed are all listed below, so feel free to do your own 100-day challenge. I hope you guys enjoyed, stay positive, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!